And I thank you for joining us today. My name is Neil Rosenberg. I'm the president of QTS, Quality Technology Solutions, and I will be presenting today's content on behalf of Microsoft. What is EMS and why should I care? So that's our event today, and we'll take you through that in about an hour or less. Try to answer any questions and help you understand what this powerful collection of products can do for you. Before we get into that, a little background on QTS. We are a Microsoft Gold partner, actually for 3 competencies: the data center, which is Hyper-V, System Center, Windows Server, and data platform, which is Azure competencies, as well as mid-market, a number of silver competencies, and been an award winner with Microsoft locally, regionally, nationally, and internationally as a managed partner for over 15 years. But I think what makes us particularly strong is our senior level staff talent and the expertise that our consultants bring to the table, but also their ability and willingness to share knowledge and work with customers in a knowledge transfer capacity. So essentially, we help customers to deploy these solutions, and we can talk briefly at the end about next steps, including possible Microsoft funding to support your interest in these technologies. So let's talk about the cloud first, because the Enterprise Mobility Suite, or EMS, is a cloud-based solution with some on-premise components, and the cloud is obviously very important to Microsoft in terms of its overall product strategy. So in terms of the cloud, organizations are looking at cloud solutions to accomplish objectives around speed, scale, and economics. Very directly, cloud solutions can be implemented much faster than on-premise solutions because the plumbing, the infrastructure is already pre-built, and it's largely a matter of activating the service and customizing or configuring the solution. With the cloud, you have the ability to scale, if not infinitely, at least significantly, and the ability to take advantage of services without necessarily having to either buy infrastructure or buy additional infrastructure as your utilization of services grow. And then lastly, it's an economic play. It's simply more cost effective to take advantage of Microsoft's economy of scale and the pricing they're able to get on hardware in their data centers than buying stuff on your own, especially as a mid-size organization that a lot of our customers tend to be. As an example, we're used to thinking of servers in terms of, or data centers in terms of servers as a unit of scale. You know, a rack mount server, you need more scalability, you buy another server, you spin up another virtual machine. In Microsoft's Azure service, their unit is about the size of a tractor trailer. They just essentially take this container and plug it into power and cooling, and everything in there, that's the next step up. That's how they upgrade their data centers at that economy of scale. Most organizations can't come anything close to the economics that Microsoft has in running their data centers. So the cloud is very compelling and continues to rate high on CIO priorities according to all the major market research firms. That being said, for most organizations, it's not a question of whether they're using the cloud, and this has been the case now for a couple years, as much as where, what particular workloads or capabilities, whether it's improving efficiency with something like Office 365 or Azure, or for the IT organization, the Enterprise Mobility Suite, innovation to be able to get things done faster and redeploy IT budgets so less is being spent just running and maintaining what you have, and more of that budget is being spent on new capabilities that create competitive advantage or potentially reduce cost. And I would argue, and this is going to be a major focus of our annual customer conference we'll be running again in September for the 8th or 9th year, I'm not even sure, is the ability to transform your business, that IT leaders today need to be focused not on maintaining infrastructure, but rather on reducing infrastructure cost and focus and putting that human effort and that brain power into creative new ways to apply technology into the business, because the change that we're going to see in the next 5 years and that we're already starting to see is unlike anything we've seen in the past. It's actually pretty amazing, and the role of IT is truly changing as we go forward. So let's talk about the efficiency and economy of the cloud, and I'll illustrate this by comparing on-premise and cloud solutions. In the old world of on-premise technology, the IT organization, to enable an application, would need to, take a deep breath here, configure the networking, configure the server hardware, configure the operating system, configure the virtualization, configure the storage, configure the security management, load balancing and integration, configure the databases, configure the runtimes, and by the way, after all that is done, configure the applications. That's a lot of work to get to the most important piece, the piece that truly adds value to your business, that empowers your users. In a cloud world, breaking down the types of services, we have software as a service, in which case everything is pre-configured. The IT organization just needs to focus on enabling the application. Examples of software as a service would be things like Microsoft Office 365, Salesforce.com, Workday or Concur, or the components of Microsoft's Enterprise Mobility Suite, which we're going to talk about in a moment. Conversely, infrastructure as a service, virtual machines in the cloud, and platform as a service, running applications built for the cloud platform in the cloud, have most of the lower level stuff pre-configured, and really in the case of infrastructure as a service, you're just configuring everything within a virtual machine, or in the case of platform as a service, you're building, managing, and configuring the application that you've created. And if you're interested in those services, we have a recorded webinar, What is Azure and Why Should I Care?, that you can reference for follow-up. And we also have a seminar coming up on Azure for disaster recovery in the April timeframe. So Microsoft's product line essentially spans Office 365, Microsoft Dynamics CRM at the moment, but their ERP solutions are gradually being turned up as SaaS applications as well, and Power BI, as well as the Enterprise Mobility Suite, with the various components of Azure acting as the platform as a service and infrastructure as a service components. So what is EMS and why should I care? As Satya Nadella says, the Enterprise Mobility Suite may be the most important and strategic piece of infrastructure development that Microsoft is doing for enterprises today. This was a quote from the product launch in 2014. And similarly, according to Brad Anderson, Vice President for Windows Server and System Center, EMS is the most comprehensive platform for organizations to embrace cloud trends. So this clearly has a lot of focus, and from what I've seen, being a Microsoft partner following this organization for many, many years, I really haven't seen any products get out of the gate with as much momentum and speed as the Enterprise Mobility Suite, because it addresses so many important and pressing business needs. The industry has basically concurred with that. Gartner has given Microsoft now visionary status, the Magic Quadrant upper right section for the Enterprise Mobility Suite. And that Magic Quadrant is based on the combination of ability to execute for Microsoft as an organization and completeness of vision, which includes quality of the product. A lot of other positive press, and we've seen Enterprise Mobility Suite go head-to-head with a lot of the direct competitors, including VMware's AirWatch and IBM's Mass 360 and Mobile Iron, as well as identity products and security products. So Enterprise Mobility Suite clearly has a lot of momentum, and yet there are a lot of people that don't really still know what it is, which is why this webinar is beneficial. So getting more specific, the Enterprise Mobility Suite consists of 4 major components that I would say empower mobility. Most organizations are to some degree supporting a BYOD strategy. Bring your own desktop, bring your own device, and supporting some form of mobility. The Enterprise Mobility Suite allows you to support that mobility, but in a secure and managed way. It allows people to use devices of choice, but do so in a way that provides ease of access to corporate resources in a managed capacity, but that secures corporate assets as well as other services that users utilize. So that's the big picture. Getting more specific, the 4 silos, which are all represented by specific products that are part of the suite, are identity and access management, and that's provided by Microsoft Azure Active Directory Premium. We're going to talk about each of these individually. Mobile device and application management provided by Microsoft Intune. Information protection provided by Azure Rights Management Services. And security, that's the latest edition, provided by Advanced Threat Analytics. So each of these has a number of capabilities that we're going to drill down into, but think of the Enterprise Mobility Suite as being to bring your own device and mobility what Microsoft Office is to personal productivity, a collection of products that have integrations and that work together and are sold as a bundle at a significant discount, typically 50% or greater for the Enterprise Mobility Suite, so that organizations can take advantage of these capabilities to provide secure, managed mobility to their users. So in a bit, we're going to drill down on each of them, but I want to specifically focus on how EMS relates to Windows generally and Windows 10 in particular, and that cuts across 3 major areas: protecting application access, flexible device and application management, and security. Specifically on each, in terms of protecting application access, Windows 10 specifically provides a foundation of security, the ability to set up company devices with auto-enrollment if you're using Exchange ActiveSync, the ability to sign in with company credentials, leveraging Active Directory, and single sign-on in terms of Windows' ability to track and interact with single sign-on services. The Enterprise Mobility Suite enhances that with a number of capabilities, including self-service and password management in the cloud, remote access to on-premise and cloud web applications, and the on-premise identity is handled through an on-premise component that is actually included in the Enterprise Mobility Suite called Microsoft Identity Manager. We'll come back and talk about that, as well as the MFA capability, the multi-factor authentication capability in the Enterprise Mobility Suite. In terms of device and application management, we have a couple of capabilities. So Windows as an operating system, Windows 8 and Windows 10 have supported industry standards for application management. So third-party products that support those standards can natively manage Windows. That's because Windows 8 and Windows 10 is not only a computer operating system, but also a tablet, phablet, phone, and other type of device operating system. So these Windows 8 and 10 are manageable through management tools that comply with industry standards. You also have the ability to do app isolation and some other capabilities as part of the operating system, including OS distribution with the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit. That's a whole nother area where QTS really has done some magical things for a lot of customers, and we'd love to have that discussion of how to help you cost effectively deploy Windows 10 in a rapid fashion based on standards. The Enterprise Mobility Suite adds a number of pieces, which we're going to drill down into in a bit, around automatic enrollment into MDM, the Azure AD Premium, mobile device and mobile application management across multiple device operating systems, application distribution, so you can set up essentially a company store to distribute, manage applications that leverages some Azure backend services, and the ability to manage Windows devices via System Center Config Manager or Intune or a combination. We're going to talk about that in a bit as well. So you have a lot of capabilities that enhance Windows 8 and 10 very specifically in the Enterprise Mobility Suite. And from a licensing perspective, organizations that have enterprise agreements or cloud subscriptions can look at something from Microsoft called the Enterprise Cloud Suite that rolls all these pieces together, typically as an extension of Office 365 licensing. So we're happy to explain the differences in that program for anyone who's interested. So essentially, the Enterprise Mobility Suite orchestrates mobile device management through the life cycle in Windows 10, as well as for mobile devices. And then from a security perspective, again, we have some foundational security pieces built into Windows, and then the Enterprise Mobility Suite adds encryption of data at the file and or email level, the ability to control rights to documents, more advanced security reporting, and now we're getting into the advanced threat analytics piece as we look at suspicious activity and behavioral analysis. So as an example, when we look at the Microsoft Enterprise Mobility Suite has its ability to protect mobile devices, we manage authentication and identity using Azure AD Premium. Then we can manage both the device at a policy level and applications at a policy level with Intune, and then use rights management services to manage specific emails and or documents, even if those emails and documents go off network. So that's how those pieces fit together. And then the advanced threat analytics lets you look at network traffic and identify potentially concerning behavior. And that's how all the pieces fit together into the Enterprise Mobility Suite. So let's now drill down a little bit in terms of hybrid identity and talk about Azure AD Premium, the first major component of the suite. So anybody who's using Office 365 is actually already using Azure Active Directory. And Azure Active Directory is not Microsoft's Active Directory just ported to the cloud. It's a directory service built specifically for the cloud and scaling for the cloud that has the ability to have data replicated or synchronized into it from Active Directory. So you can't take your on-premise domain controller and replicate it to Azure AD, but you can synchronize data using a tool that used to be called DirSync. Some of you are probably using that with Office 365, that got renamed to Azure AD Sync, which has recently been renamed to Azure AD Connect and had various capabilities added, including password synchronization. So essentially, you can take your Active Directory metadata that's pertinent to cloud applications and passwords and synchronize them between your on-premise Active Directory and Active Directory in the cloud sitting behind Office 365. Azure AD Premium takes that capability and bundles in a number of technologies, as well as a cloud catalog of applications for single sign-on, as well as a cloud self-service capability in terms of password management, as well as on-premise technology, Microsoft Identity Manager. So Microsoft Identity Manager is the new generation of what used to be called FIM, or Forefront Identity Manager. So FIM has become MIM, and there are two flavors to FIM-MIM. There's a free flavor that we often use when we are linking multiple Active Directory forests together to have a single global address list. and with it the inter-office replication tool for replication of calendar data for free busy search. So those components we do in a lot of projects where we're integrating or disintegrating disparate organizations. And again, that's a free tool from Microsoft, whether you have EMS or not, as long as you license Windows Server. The enterprise version of MIM, however, is a pay-for tool. It can actually be fairly expensive, but Microsoft has bundled it in to the Enterprise Mobility Suite as part of Azure AD Premium, because since Azure AD Premium gives you cloud single sign-on capabilities, Microsoft wanted to integrate that with their existing on-premise meta directory and single sign-on capabilities. And so essentially, you're getting MIM thrown in for free to give you on-premise meta directory, and then Azure AD Premium extends that Active Directory into the cloud, and through their catalog allows you to tie into literally there are over about 2,600 applications now that are all written to support Azure AD Premium. So for example, if you're using, dare I say, Salesforce, and perhaps you're using Box or Dropbox in lieu of OneDrive, although if you have Office 365, you own OneDrive, and therefore you have a lot of cost efficiency in using the Microsoft solution, and maybe you're using a Concur or a Workday or some other cloud application, you can essentially configure all those applications to take authentication from your on-premise Active Directory, tying in or gatewaying through Azure AD Premium, the pay-for product, so that if you add a user in Active Directory, that user's rights govern their ability to sign on to your cloud applications. And probably even more important, when you deactivate a user, that user's access to your cloud applications is cut off. So you essentially have a single point of security management for your cloud SaaS applications, including Office 365 and other Microsoft applications, as well as your on-premise applications. Your Active Directory becomes your single or primary point of identity management. And that's very powerful. So you combine these pieces together. You also have the ability to apply things like Active Directory groups. You can brand the site with your own logo and colors. We've done that for a number of organizations, including some larger retailers. You have the ability to encrypt and secure passwords in the cloud, as well as take advantage of the security reporting and analytics that's part of the ATA component of EMS. And then you also have multi-factor authentication. Many of you think of RSA tokens for multi-factor authentication, but MFA can really be any type of second form of identity. It's like saying I won't just accept a driver's license, I need to see a driver's license and a passport. So similarly, we won't just accept a password, we need to see a password, something you know, and a token from a device, something you have, or perhaps biometrics, something you are, whether it's a fingerprint or a retinal scan or something like that. So Microsoft's MFA solution is included as part of Azure AD Premium and therefore part of the Enterprise Mobility Suite. And Microsoft MFA is based on the acquisition a few years ago of a company called Phone Factor. And what Phone Factor does, or did, is had the ability to get a token code on a phone. So your phone became your secondary item. In addition to your user ID and password, you had to add to it a code that would appear on your phone and change, just like an RSA token. Although there's other ways you can present that, like through a text message, etc. So it's forcing multiple forms of ID as a matter of authentication. And obviously there's integration across the Microsoft applications as well as many third-party applications. So if you're using things like RSA, this is potentially an area where you can reduce third-party cost by taking advantage of the Microsoft solution bundled into EMS. And then lastly, reducing the load on IT by empowering users to do self-service password changes and resets, to have delegated group management, and self-service capabilities. This was part of System Center Service Manager as an on-premise technology, but in the cloud, this is provided as part of Azure AD Premium, and this is very compelling to a lot of organizations because password-related help desk calls probably are always going to be a large source of help desk tickets and consumer of IT resources until self-service is enabled. So we talked a little bit about the multi-factor authentication. User attempts to log in or perform an action. We require an additional authorization to take place, whether we're going against Active Directory or ADFS or other sources. And so by using Azure MFA, the user has to respond to the challenge, which can be a text, a phone call giving you a number, or a mobile app running on the phone itself, which is the most traditional use case. And based on that, the response is returned to the app and the user is allowed in to access the application. So for those of you that are using third-party technologies, this is potentially a cost savings play. For those of you that aren't, but that want to add an additional layer of security and implement defense in depth strategies, this is something extra that you can take advantage of. Now, we're seeing huge value in the Azure AD Premium space, and we're doing a lot of education with customers on that. But the thing that most organizations are struggling with today is mobile device management. And this is where a lot of our discussions around the Enterprise Mobility Suite are starting with customers. I always make a point when I talk to customers and ask what MDM solution. First, do you have a mobile device management solution? And second, what are you using? I always make a point of third asking, are you happy with it? Because I would say 60% of the time, I get a lot of negative feedback from customers about those other solutions. And part of it comes down to the solution's only going to be as good as the knowledgeable people configuring it. And any solution, if you don't know how to configure it or you have a partner that doesn't know how to configure it, it's going to be suboptimal. But on the flip side, a lot of the solutions do have limitations, and I think it's important to understand what you want to accomplish with the solution, kind of what are the policies that you're trying to enforce, and then determine how well those solutions will work for you. Again, the advantage of the Microsoft approach with EMS is that Intune is, I would say, as good a product as products like AirWatch or Mobile Iron or Mass 360, but it's part of a suite. So from a customer perspective, you could essentially buy Intune and pretty much get most of the rest of the suite for free. Or you can buy other pieces and pretty much get Intune for free. So we're seeing customers, much as they did with Office and much as they do with other Microsoft technologies, look at their range of third-party products they're offering and say, well, I can really take advantage of a cost economy here and perhaps even reduce costs by simplifying administration. So mobile device management is a big driver in these discussions. And the approach that Microsoft Intune takes is really a comprehensive approach to both application and device management. So you have IT managing devices that you can either use Intune, used to be called Windows Intune, now it's just Intune, managing devices through Intune as a cloud-based service, or if you choose to manage devices with System Center Config Manager integrated with Intune, Intune becomes the way to get to and manage the devices, and SCCM 2012 R2 or higher, that would include the new 15.11 version that we're doing a webinar on in next month, March. The naming, by the way, is now the cloud standard, so instead of calling it SCCM 2016 or 2015, they're calling it 15 for the year 2015 and 11 for the month of release, so 15.11. The next version, if it comes out in March of 2016, will be 16.03. And the bottom line is that's because the revs on these products that are cloud integrated are going to be occurring at cloud speed. You know, if you do the Enterprise Mobility Suite or Office 365 or Azure or any other Microsoft cloud solution, you can't count on a new version every couple of years. You can count on a new version every couple of months that'll just be slipstreamed in, and that you'll have the ability to control when those features become available to your users, but that will just be available to you without additional cost or effort other than deploying new features or capabilities. So in any event, one of the decisions you have to make with Intune is, do I want to manage my devices directly from the cloud with Intune, which usually makes sense if your mobile devices are managed by a separate team from your Windows devices, or do I want to manage them from within SCCM if I already have that and have that single pane of glass across multiple capabilities? There's no right answer here. It's a question of what's the right answer for you, and that requires some further discussion. But as we then look at the mobile devices, we can get a view of all the devices that we're managing with Intune and SCCM, as well as all the applications and different form factors, and have the ability to manage both the devices and applications through their life cycle, which is pretty powerful. So key capabilities are the ability to set policies based on Android, iOS, and Windows Phone. There is no support for BlackBerry devices, so that those of you that still have BlackBerries, that needs to be a separate silo of management. But most of our customers that have BlackBerries manage them through either BES or through the cloud service that's part of Office 365, the free, essentially BIS product. The ability to apply conditional access and compliance policies, the ability to deploy software to devices from a company store and to control software through policies, the ability to manage those updates, to protect the devices from a malware perspective, and also to be able to have your inventory of hardware, software, and licensing, and that if you're managing Windows devices in Intune rolls up there, or if you're going back down to SCCM, you can bring it all into SCCM. So Intune essentially provides a similar range of features to the other major commercial MDM products, but this one is supported by and bundled into a suite by Microsoft. We also have data protection capabilities, and that's the Azure Rights Management Services. So many of you may recall Microsoft has had rights management services as a product that's part of the eCal. For those of you that are familiar with the enterprise agreement, you could step up to add a variety of advanced capabilities through the eCal or enterprise cal, and that included Windows rights management services. Windows RMS is a technology we didn't really see a lot of adoption for, very limited adoption in the marketplace, at least in my experience, based on three major limitations. Number one, it required a lot of plumbing. You had to have SQL servers, you need to have Windows certificate services. If you wanted to do it with redundancy, there was a lot of servers to set up and manage, and obviously also a cost layer to have the rights management cal. You didn't need to buy extra server software, but you did have a client license cost. Number two, it was limited to pretty much Microsoft documents. You had to buy third-party products to be able to do things like PDFs and AutoCAD and other stuff. And number three, there wasn't really a way to extend it outside your network without buying a third-party service. So the challenge would be that you could get this great technology to protect your internal documents, but then if that internal document got emailed out of your network, you could prevent somebody from opening it, but you couldn't really control what they could do with it unless they authenticated in some way against your network or a third-party service. Microsoft Azure Rights Management Services essentially does the same things, but takes advantage of being a cloud service so that you can still protect your emails and documents, assigning granular security rights, but that you can do so without having to build additional plumbing and infrastructure. It's a cloud service, so you just turn it on. You can do so across not only Office, but PDFs and other document types that are supported or support the RMS APIs. And that you can do so not only based on internal network authentication against Active Directory, but also by authenticating against a Microsoft quote-unquote live account, which could be any email address that's associated with Microsoft. So for example, my email address of nrosenberg@qtsnet.com is not only my QTS email address, but it's also a Microsoft Live account. It's activated against that service from Microsoft, which means that I can consume RMS protected data, whether it's from Microsoft or from any of you. My email address allows me to log on and have those rights applied through the Microsoft Cloud. So if any of you want to RMS protect a document and send it to me and restrict my rights, I can do so just by being logged in to my email address. So it's very powerful stuff, and it's very easy to set up. QTS has quick start offerings to help you get up and running. We'll talk about that at the end of this webinar. But our RMS work is really, the setup is probably an hour or two at the most. Most of the time we spend in our quick start is around consulting and training, helping you to figure out how you want to use the service and transferring knowledge on use of the service, because it's essentially, it's a SaaS application. You just turn it on, and with limited configuration, it's available to you. So the idea here is that we can integrate with a variety of Microsoft and potentially non-Microsoft technologies, including on-premise rights management. SharePoint and Exchange integration is out of the box, so we can RMS enable particular emails or documents or document libraries within SharePoint. We can tie into Windows Server. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the FCI, File Classification Infrastructure feature in Windows Server. We're currently working with a major retailer in the hospitality space to protect their intellectual property by combining RMS with FCI on Windows Server 2012 so that file documents are protected by default, and if they go off network, people's rights to open them will be limited. So we can literally protect that organization's secret sauces, figuratively and literally, I suppose. So there's a lot of capability to make it easy for users to control and secure data at an individual decision level, but also to set policies at an organizational level to control that access and protect your intellectual property and business assets. So the RMS key capabilities we kind of talked through, the ability to have policy settings. So for example, if I were to email you a document, whether it's the email itself or a document that I attach to the email, I can set policies that say you can open the document, but you can't print it. You also can't copy to the clipboard to paste it into another document. And by the way, your rights to view the document expire in 7 days. And so those kind of things, the expiration controls, the view controls, give you an ability to protect your data from folks that shouldn't have access to it getting it. And then lastly, from a security management perspective, we have advanced threat analytics, which was added to the Enterprise Mobility Suite last year. Microsoft went out and purchased a company to add this capability. And if you think about it, this kind of security monitoring is the missing piece in EMS in terms of the whole secure mobility. So we have behavioral analytics, the ability to look at what's going on. So part of what we do here is we do port mirroring to look at an Active Directory domain controller so we can see logon activity. There is therefore an on-premise component and some setup that's required in terms of a virtual machine and ability to access certain network ports and so on. And then from that we can look at behavioral patterns, like if Neil is logged in from New Jersey, but an hour ago he logged in from Romania. That's a bit suspicious. He's fast, but he's not that fast. Similarly, detection for known attacks and issues. So in addition to behavioral, we have signature-based monitoring. And therefore, the combination of those two gives you threat detection. So it's essentially another tool in your security toolbox. And again, fairly easy to set up if the infrastructure is in place. We essentially can set it up and transfer knowledge with you in a day, and then tie back for a follow-up maybe a month later to look at what's been captured and collected. So a very easy solution to deploy, especially if you know the nuances and have done it before, as we have as a company. I want to take a little bit of a tangent because one of the pieces, it's not part of the enterprise mobility suite, but it's definitely related to the mobility concept, and it does tie to Azure, is Azure Remote App. And I want to mention this because Azure Remote App is a way to deploy applications from the cloud to your PCs, but also mobile devices. And I'm going to do a gross oversimplification here and say Azure Remote App is kind of like what we traditionally use maybe Citrix software for. Think of Citrix XenApp or the various name iterations before that, or Microsoft RDS, what used to be terminal services, but as a cloud service. So instead of building a terminal services RDS farm on-premise, and then installing XenApp on top of it and configuring everything with redundancy and high availability and enough scalability to meet the maximum use case scenario, we can take advantage of a scalable cloud platform as a component within Azure that allows you to centrally manage and deploy applications to your devices from the cloud. Now, this does require some planning because at the end of the day, we have to make sure that we have the right bandwidth and performance characteristics between the client, which in this case is sitting in the Azure cloud, and the server that an application is running from, which might be sitting in the Azure cloud or might be on-premise. So there's a whole discussion we need to have to make sure this is the right solution for a given use case. But we're seeing a lot of interest and a lot of momentum here, and it obviously ties very much to the secure mobility discussion. And some of the performance dynamics can be addressed with Azure Express Route, which is, again, one of the technologies we talked about in our What is Azure and Why Should I Care webinar that's recorded and available to you. So what is Azure Remote App? It's the ability to remotely deliver applications from Azure to a variety of devices, including Windows, iOS, Mac OS X, and Android devices. We use RDP, Microsoft's protocol, same protocol as RDS and terminal services, and Remote FX to make it efficient. We have the ability to scale, so you basically pay as you go as you use the service rather than having to buy a lot of server infrastructure, and you have flexibility in terms of deployment choices and methodology. So a couple of different use cases, move to the cloud. We can essentially configure the app in the cloud and just turn it up. There are a variety of templates for different OS versions and applications, so it's similar to generating a VM in Azure, except it's an app VM based on a Windows desktop that runs in Azure. We can bring it as is, so we can just take your app and run it in the cloud. And we have the ability to reduce complexity by centralized management, especially if we're also putting server platform in Azure. And you have high performance and scalability based on it being the Microsoft cloud. So a couple ways we can deploy. We can either have these apps, these session hosts, be running in Azure and not be part of your domain. And we have the ability to maintain published applications just as you would in a RDS or Citrix environment. And separately, we can do Citrix, XenApp, and XenDesktop in Azure if that's your choice. The difference is running Citrix, XenApp, or XenDesktop or Microsoft RDS in Azure is more of an infrastructure as a service approach. Azure Remote App is more of a software as a service approach. So if you think back about that slide I showed earlier, it's a lot fewer pieces for you to manage than if you're building half the plumbing from the VM on up, the way you would be if you weren't using Remote App. So we can have these VMs just run in the cloud and access applications and have them authenticate back through Azure AD via DirSync or Azure AD Connect if you choose, or we can actually have the apps be domain joined and be corporate apps where everything is managed through a VPN between Azure and your on-premise network, and essentially we have domain joined desktop images spun off from Azure Remote App that are essentially running your applications from the cloud. So a couple different ways to do it, and a good way to hash this all out is looking at this as part of an Azure Planning Services engagement, where our engineers will spend time with you explaining the different Azure capabilities, including Remote App, answering the deep technical questions, and jointly architecting the solution specifically for your environment. For those of you that have planning vouchers, you can do that and consume our quick design services that way at no out-of-pocket cost to you other than using the vouchers. And so essentially with Remote App, we have the ability to manage the whole life cycle of the application. And this feature slide just shows some of the capabilities. It's available pretty much worldwide, pretty much where the Azure data centers are across a variety of platforms, and that can also include the Office 365 Click-to-Run client, just consuming one of your licenses to be able to use Click-to-Run as a template within Remote App. So we've covered a lot of technology. I want to kind of tie this back together to the Microsoft Cloud strategy. So for those of you that are running Office 365, you do have some basic identity management capabilities for MDM that are part of Office 365. You can do single sign-on by using Azure AD without Azure AD Premium, and you have a basic multi-factor authentication capability in 365. You have some very light MDM capabilities through Exchange ActiveSync, and any of you that are interested, we can send you a link. There's a good article on the Microsoft website. You could also Bing or Google, if you choose, the article for what are the differences between MDM and Office 365 and Intune. And you have some very basic document protection capabilities in 365, but when you combine it with the Enterprise Mobility Suite, we're adding all these other capabilities we just talked about, including the multi-factor authentication at an advanced level, including cloud single sign-on for all cloud apps that are compatible with Azure AD Premium, the self-service capability, the Microsoft Identity Manager. We have the ability to do the more advanced MDM, including mobile application management and capabilities to limit the app usage, and the full functional RMS within Azure to protect your documents and your emails, including PDFs and third-party apps that are compatible. When you combine this with Azure, and again, we have a separate webinar, What is Azure and Why Should I Care?, across the different capabilities of Azure in the cloud from a compute, from a storage, from a networking, and an overall platform perspective. Secured, where you control your encryption keys, and potentially managed with Active Directory and System Center, you have a very powerful collection of products that all work together to help you bring your services to market faster, with more scalability and reduced cost, taking advantage of Microsoft's cloud. And so Microsoft's cloud and IT strategy is based on a hybridization of your data center, whether you're running Hyper-V, VMware, or other virtualization technologies, or whether you've got physical servers, combined with taking advantage of the cloud, Azure, and software as a service capabilities like Office 365. What are the things we can stop doing? What are the things we can do more cost effectively to free up resources to focus on innovation and business value? That's really the key question today. And the Azure platform strategy takes advantage of Azure's global data center footprint. So we now have more data centers in Asia Pacific, in South America, in places that we didn't a few years ago, and takes advantage of that hybridization of on-premise, and Microsoft has recently released Azure Stack, which is a variety of on-premise capabilities that give you the ability to do cloud scalable types of things with on-premise infrastructure that you control in your private cloud. So you can choose between taking advantage of the public cloud and or your secure private cloud and integrating them as appropriate. And that's what we're helping customers decide more and more today is what are the things I should keep on premise and manage and control and secure myself with my own resources, and what are the things I can put in the public cloud, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, software as a service, disaster recovery as a service. We're going to talk about that in our upcoming seminar on Azure Site Recovery. Backup as a service, storage as a service. What are the as a services we can take advantage of to outsource management of workloads to provide the same or more capabilities, but at a lower cost and freeing up our internal resources to focus on what's unique to our business. Those are the discussions I'm having with CIOs and business leaders today around the Microsoft platform. And you have, as I said, Gartner Magic Quadrant across all the major different cloud areas today, but an interesting contrast with organizations like Amazon, Salesforce, and Google that are really cloud only. Microsoft's not cloud only, they're not on-premise only. They give you choice and flexibility by workload to take advantage of the things you want to in the cloud and continue using the things you want to on-premise. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the most recent management, the most recent suite in the Microsoft world, which is the Operations Management Suite. And we'll have a webinar in Q2 about OMS, but OMS essentially combines Operational Insights, which is a cloud dashboard. Think of it as a very light version of System Center Operations Manager. But that also ties into Operations Manager and its data, so you have a cloud dashboard and visualization capability. Combined with Azure Automation, think of System Center Orchestrator, the ability to automate IT operational processes. Combined with Azure Storage and Azure-based disaster recovery through Azure Site Recovery. This is all wrapped together in the Operations Management Suite, and those of you that have enterprise agreements can add this very cost effectively to take advantage of these capabilities and others. So we've covered a lot of ground, and I want to kind of wrap up with a conclusion and next steps we can take following up from today's webinar. So first thing, we work with our customers from an educational and a knowledge transfer strategy to help you to make the right decisions around technologies and your business. We'd be happy to have a call or a meeting or a web session to understand more about your environment, your goals and objectives, and make recommendations in terms of not only the Enterprise Mobility Suite, but the whole Microsoft stack. What are the things you should do, in what order, and also what Microsoft incentives and programs you can take advantage of. I'm going to come back to that in a second with quick start stuff. For those of you that have enterprise agreements, you probably have unused planning services vouchers. Microsoft used to call them deployment planning services, but it confused people because people thought that included deployment. These planning services vouchers, at least the way Microsoft expects the program to be administered, give you the ability to use these vouchers to pay partners like QTS to do planning, design, and architecture. And we do this in a very collaborative fashion with our practice leads and senior level engineers and architects and consultants to help you understand these products and capabilities and figure out what a deployment looks like architecturally in your environment. What are the gotchas going to be? How do we help you to deploy these technologies the right way the first time with less risk and a speedier end result? So QTS participates in 5 of the planning services programs, the Azure Public Cloud or AZPS program, which includes a flavor specifically for the Enterprise Mobility Suite, Private Cloud, which is flavors for System Center, Hyper-V, and Windows Server, which includes Active Directory. So we do a lot of AD design and upgrade planning using vouchers this way. Exchange and the artist formerly known as Lync, which is now Skype for Business, and that can be on-premise or in the cloud as part of Office 365. SharePoint, which can be on-premise or in the cloud as part of Office 365, as well as Yammer and OneDrive are very closely related to SharePoint, or desktop, Windows and Office. How do I roll these out? What features do I want to use, etc. So we participate in these programs and can take advantage of planning services vouchers you have, or if you don't have them, we can still deliver our quick design services to you to help you understand the technologies and plan and architect a successful deployment. This is a great way for us to get to know you and vice versa. We also have packaged services we call quick start engagements, usually 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, 3 day, 5 day, 7 day engagements to stand up the technologies. All the EMS technologies we've talked about are in the 1 day, 2 day, 3 day flavor, and they're fairly quick deployments, pun intended, and we're able to do that with very strong knowledge transfer. For those of you that have the Enterprise Mobility Suite, you may be eligible for Microsoft funding to pay for our services for deployment. So let's talk about that on follow-up. But this is a great way to get up and running with strong knowledge transfer. And then we do a variety of seminars, webinars, and educational events, including our annual customer conference. We have some Windows 10 events coming up, actually, even later this week in New York. So with that being said, I'm going to turn off the recording and unmute the audience, and if there are questions, I'm happy to answer them. But before I do that, I'd like to thank you all for your time and attention, and hope this was beneficial, and look forward to exploring how we can help you take advantage of the Enterprise Mobility Suite in your business.